Okay, in this video we are going to discuss chapter 8 ecology. We are going to look at part B, structured question. Question number 1, a figure 4 shows a graph of competition between Paramecium aurelia and Paramecium caudatum. Paramecium are organisms that are classified under protists. Okay, they are actually unicellular eukaryotes. So in this experiment, okay, so these two Paramecium species, okay, were grown in a medium. So let's say, for example, this is a petri dish. Okay, so and then you place these two Paramecium species in this petri dish with limiting food and also space. Alright, so as you grow the Paramecium in this these two Paramecium in this petri dish with limiting food and space, you will observe that the population of Paramecium aurelia increase with time and the population of Paramecium caudatum decrease. Okay, and at the end, the population of Paramecium caudatum cannot survive the competition. Okay, it will die off at the end of the experiment. Okay. So number 1, state the type of competition. So because the competition is between two different species, so this is known as interspecific competition. Okay, interspecific competition. Okay, competition. Okay, interspecific meaning competition between different species. If the other one is intraspecific competition, okay, is competition between individual of the same species. So usually for intraspecific competition, a competition between individuals of the same species living together, and they will compete for food, space, and also mating. Okay. Okay, so question number 2, what conclusion can be made from the graph? Alright, so if you look at this graph, you will observe that over the time, the population of Paramecium aurelia increases and the population of Paramecium caudatum decrease. Okay, so it means that for the first point, okay, what conclusion can be made? The two Paramecium aurelia and Paramecium caudatum will compete. Okay, compete for the same resources. Okay, they will compete for the same resources such as food and also space. Okay, and number 2, okay, you have to summarize what happened to the population growth of these two Paramecium species. So for Paramecium aurelia, okay, so the population growth for Paramecium aurelia, it grows successfully in this competition. Okay, Paramecium aurelia grows successfully in this competition over Paramecium caudatum. And another point that you could summarize is that you could explain for the population growth of Paramecium caudatum. So Paramecium caudatum population cannot survive the competition. Okay, so next question, question 3. Explain what happened on the 5th day of the experiment. So on the 5th day of experiment, okay, you will observe that the population of aurelia increase. So that is the point that you can write. Population of aurelia increase. Whereas, okay, Paramecium caudatum population decreases. Okay, so you have to write in full sentences, of course. Okay. So question number 4, what type of competition would happen after the 10th day of the experiment? So after the 10th day of experiment, okay, so you will observe that the population of caudatum will decrease, and later there is no more caudatum that will survive. The population of Paramecium caudatum will die off. Okay, so because Paramecium caudatum die off, so this type of competition is competitive exclusion. Okay, exclusion. Competitive exclusion is when two species competing for the same limiting resources cannot coexist, okay, in the same place. They cannot coexist. The strongest species survive and the weaker one will die off. Okay, so it means that this will lead to local elimination of a competing species. The weaker one will not be able to survive. Okay, question B, resource partitioning and character displacement. Okay, resource partitioning and character displacement is a type of strategy to reduce competition among individuals of the same genus. State how competition for food is reduced when two different species of Galapagos finches are in geographically overlapping habitat. Okay, so two different species, okay, that are geographically overlapping. Okay, so it means that, for example, there is an island, okay, an island where you have two different species of Galapagos finches, species A, species B. They live in the same area. So when they live in the same area, we call this as sympatric population. Okay, sympatric population, they live in the same area, so they will compete for the same food, for example. Okay, so they compete for the same food that are available in this island. Okay, so that's mean, okay, state how competition for food is reduced. Okay, so how do you reduce the competition between these two species? Okay, so in order to reduce competition between the two species of Galapagos finches, okay, two different types of birds in this case that lives in the same area, so the two species will have different big size. Okay, different big size. The two species will have different big, paruh lah kan, big size, big sizes. Okay, big sizes. Or so when they have different big sizes, species A, for example, will have the bigger beak, the species B will have the smaller beak. So because the two species have different big size, so species A will find bigger fruits or bigger nuts to feed on, and the species B, because they have smaller big size, so they will find smaller fruits or smaller nuts to feed on. Okay, so they will consume different food. Okay, different food, because they now develop different big sizes. So this is what we call it as character displacement. Okay, the two species that live in the same area, they have overlapping natures, they live in the same area, or sympatric population. So in order to reduce competition, they will develop new morphology. Okay, in this case, they have different big size so that they can consume different food. Okay, this one is character displacement. So basically, character displacement is when the competing species diverge in their physical characteristics. So when they have different physical characteristics, this will reduce competition between these two species. Okay, so question number 2, 7 different species of Dominican Republic lizards, Anolis species, live in the same tree. Okay, so they have overlapping niche. They live in the same tree. So in order to reduce competition between 7 different species of this lizard, okay, so they live in the same tree. Okay, so they are fighting for limiting space, okay, and also limiting food. Alright, for example. So in order to reduce competition, they will divide, okay, which species will live on the canopy of the tree, for example, on the branches of the tree, or on the ground. So this is what we call it as resource partitioning. Okay, resource partitioning. So it means that each lizard, okay, will occupy distinct or different, okay, distinct niche. niche or different branch or space. Okay, so this is what we group this as resource partitioning. Okay, resource partitioning. So when one species live on the canopy, the other species live on the branches of the tree, or the other one live on the ground, for example, this will reduce competition between these lizard species. Okay. Alright, question number 2. A figure 5 shows illustration of the head of 3 species of birds. Okay, so use information in the figure to explain how interspecific competition between the bird is reduced. Okay, this question is similar to the question given here. Okay, where you have different bird species that live in the same area. They will form a slight different morphology this morphology will reduce competition between the bird species. So for example, species A will have smaller beak, species B will have a medium-sized beak, and also species C will have the bigger beak. So when they have different beak size, they will feed on different food. Okay, different food. So this question is worth 3 mark. Okay, 2 marks. So for the first point here, okay, so individual of different species will compete for the same resources in this ecosystem. Okay, so in order to reduce competition, so the bird will have different beak size. Okay, the bird will have different beak size. And then number 3, okay, the next point that you could add into your answer, because they have different beak sizes, so the bird will feed on different food sources, such as they will feed on different fruits or different seeds. Okay, and also different sizes of insects. Okay, so first point, they compete, the 3 species. Okay, these 3 species will compete, okay, for the same resources. Okay, resources, okay, in this ecosystem, such as food and also space to live in. And then number 2, in order to reduce competition, they will develop different beak sizes. Okay, so therefore they will feed on different food sources, such as different fruits, nuts, and also insects. Okay, so question number 3, okay, A, what is ecological niche? So for this question, it asks you to give the definition of the term ecological niche. Same goes to question B. Also, it asks you for defining the term ecological community. So for question that asks you to define terms, usually it is worth 1 mark. Okay, so you have to know and or memorize the definition for this term. Okay, so for ecological niche is actually, what is ecological niche? So niche it refers to the functional role of an organism in an ecosystem and the habitat or physical area where it lives and also grow. Okay, that is niche, ecological niche. Okay, the functional role of an organism in an ecosystem and the habitat or physical area where it lives and grows. Okay, so B, define ecological community. So when we look at the term community, so for example, you have certain habitat, okay, such as in a pond. Okay, for example, this is a pond. So in this pond, you'll find fish. Okay, fish of species A, and then you have fish of species B, and then you also find that in this pond also there's species C, frogs. Okay, frogs of species C that lives in this area also. Okay, frogs. So you also have other species living in this pond. So when you have individuals, okay, of different species living in the same habitat and they are interacting with one another, so this is what we call it as community. Okay, so basically a community is all the populations of different species that live in the same area and interact with one another. Okay, so all of the population of different species lives in the same area and interact with one another. Okay, C. Differentiate between fundamental niche and realized niche. Okay, so you have to understand this. So basically for fundamental niche, okay, I'll give you the definition first. Okay, so fundamental niche is the niche potentially occupied by a species. Okay, the niche potentially, so you look at the keyword here, potentially occupied. Okay, occupied by a species. Okay, whereas, okay, realized niche is the niche actually, okay, the niche actually occupied by that species. Okay, so if you look at this keyword, okay, fundamental niche is the niche potentially occupied. So what is that? What does it mean by potentially occupied? So it is when the species can survive, okay, and occupy the surrounding without the competition of another species. Okay, without the competition of another species. That is fundamental niche, without the competition of another species. Okay, this is without competition. Okay, for realized niche, it occurs when for example, two species living in the same area, and these two species will show, okay, which space they can actually occupy, which food they can actually feed on. So that is realized niche. Okay, this is with competition. Okay, with competition by another species. Okay, so for example, okay, if you refer to your notes, okay, on the example given, on the competition between two barnacle species. Okay, two barnacle species that lives in a on a rock. Okay, so this is a rock near a shore. Okay, so this I'll use a different color to indicate that this is water, for example. Okay, so this is water. Okay, so this the purple line here indicates rock. Okay, so this is where the barnacle will live. So there are two types of barnacle here. Okay, so barnacle that lives on the upper rock here is a species name or identified as Cathamalus stellatus. Okay, stellatus. Okay, so this barnacle species, which is Cathamalus stellatus, can occupy the upper part of the rock because this type of barnacle can withstand or can survive in a much more drier part of the rock, yang lebih kering. Okay, drier part. Okay, so they occupy the upper part because dia boleh tahan dengan tempat yang lebih kering. Okay, So the other species that also present in the same space is another barnacle species, which is Balanus. Okay, Balanus balanoids. Okay, so that is the scientific name of the second species that is competing for space. Okay. Okay, so this Balanus species, the Balanus species, can only occupy the lower part of the rock, which is the lower part of the rock is more moist. Okay, more moist. So Balanus can only survive in an area that has high moisture. Okay, so when these two barnacle species, they live in the same area. Okay, so they will compete for space. So when they compete for space, so they will divide. Okay, which part the two species can occupy. So this is what we call it as resource partitioning. Okay, so for Catamulus, because it occupies the upper rock of the upper part of the rock, so this is what we call it as realized niche. Okay, realized niche is when it occurs when there's competition between the two species. Okay, realized niche of Catamulus is much more smaller. Okay, it's much more smaller when there's absence of competition by the Balanus. Okay, so fundamental niche can only be achieved, okay, when there is no competition. Okay, so if you were to remove the Balanus, okay, from this rock, only Catamulus can occupy the whole rock. So you will observe that actually, okay, the Catamulus can occupy the entire rock here. Okay, when you remove the Balanus. Okay, so when you remove Balanus, there is no competition for space between the two species. So this is what we call it as fundamental niche. Okay, fundamental niche. Okay, which is the niche potentially occupied by a species without any competition. Okay, so because the Catamulus initially it can withstand, it can survive in drier area, but they can also survive in the area that has more moisture. Okay, so that is fundamental niche. Okay, that is the difference between realized and fundamental. Ingat kalau realized adalah kawasan ataupun niche untuk sesuatu organism yang dia boleh occupy dengan adanya competition. Kalau fundamental, sebenarnya dia boleh occupy berapa banyak, macam tu. Okay, tanpa competition by another species. So kalau contohnya you do another experiment lah kan. Okay, so this is the rock again, and then you were to remove Catamulus. Okay, you were to remove Catamulus, and then you leave the Balanus to occupy the rock. Okay, so you will observe that the Balanus still occupies the lower part of the rock. Okay, so this means that the realized niche, okay, the realized niche and also the fundamental niche for Balanus is the same. Okay, so tengoklah keadaan syarat organism tu macam mana. Sebab Balanus ni dia boleh hanya tahan dekat kawasan yang lebih banyak air. Okay, so kalau removekan Catamulus, dia takkan pergi ke atas rock tu sebab dia tak boleh nak tahan area yang lebih kering. So dia hanya boleh hidup dekat area yang ada high moisture. Okay, yang dekat dengan air. Okay, so it means that for Balanus, the realized niche and the fundamental niche for Balanus is the same. So tengok syarat organism tu macam mana. Okay, so you back to the definition. Basically, for fundamental niche is the niche potentially occupied by a species, potentially occupied kan, tanpa kehadiran any competition by another species. Kalau realized niche actually occupied by that species in the presence of competition by another species. Okay, so question, so saya harap faham, tengok balik kan konsep dia. Okay, so next question D, based on the principle of competitive exclusion, what is the expected outcome when the two species with identical niche compete for the same resources? Okay, so back to the definition of competitive exclusion. So kita tengok tadi kan soalan tadi, competitive exclusion is when two species, okay, with overlapping niche, they the weaker species cannot survive the competition, so it leads to the elimination of the weaker species from that competition. Okay, so the question asks what is the expected outcome, okay, when the two species with identical niche compete for the same resources. Because we are focusing on competitive exclusion, so it means that it leads to the extinction, okay, extinction of one of the species. Okay, extinction of one of the species that are weaker, okay, that are weaker. So, and this can also lead to resource partitioning, okay, and also character displacement. All right. Okay, so next question number 4. It shows you figure 6. If you look at this figure 6, okay, it shows you graph to show the population growth of two different paramecium, okay, which is Paramecium caudatum and also Paramecium aurelia. If you notice, okay, so this question or this graph is similar to the previous question here. Okay, so but for this graph, it is much simpler, where you can straight away observe that the population of aurelia increases and the population of Paramecium caudatum decreases. So you know straight away that Paramecium caudatum is the weaker one that will die at the end of the experiment, because it is the weaker one and cannot survive. And as for aurelia, it is the stronger one, so it can survive and it can it can use the resource secara maksimum. Okay, so dia akan membiak dengan banyak lah kan. But okay, for this graph, it looks a bit more complicated, but it is actually if you look at the graph really carefully, it tells you the same story actually. Okay, so the graph that has the bold line here, okay, the bold line, it shows you if the paramecium were grown separately, alone. So maksudnya, okay, you get two petri dish, or in this case two test tube lah kan. So petri dish or test tube, okay, so you grow Paramecium caudatum. Okay, you give a certain amount of food and also space for the paramecium to survive, and another test tube or petri dish, you grow Paramecium aurelia with limited food and space. But because they are competing between individuals of the same species, okay, so you will observe that the population will increase, okay, through time. And at one point it reached a constant rate of population growth. This constant rate of population growth, it shows you that the population reaches its maximum rate, okay, to allow for population growth due to limiting space and also food. Okay, right. So for the second graph here, okay, so it shows you the graph that has dotted line. So it occurs when the two Paramecium species were grown together. Okay, so you have a petri dish or test tube. You mix together these two, Paramecium caudatum and also Paramecium aurelia. Okay, so with limiting food and also space. Okay, so through time you will observe that the population of Paramecium caudatum decrease. Okay, and the population of Paramecium aurelia increases. Okay, so this shows that the Paramecium aurelia again is the strongest species and will survive. The Paramecium caudatum is the weaker one and will die at the end of the experiment. Okay, because they cannot compete with Paramecium aurelia for food and also space. Okay, so if you look at this question for okay, figure 6 shows results of an experiment on Paramecium aurelia and caudatum that was cultured in test tube with limited resources, limited food and space. So state the conclusion that can be made from a decrease in the population for Paramecium caudatum but not for Paramecium aurelia. So what conclusion can be made from the graph? So basically for Paramecium aurelia, this paramecium uses the resources more effectively, okay, more efficiently compared to Paramecium caudatum. Okay, they uses the resources, okay, more effectively or more efficiently, okay, compared to Paramecium caudatum. So first mark. Okay, for the second mark, okay, you can also state because they use Paramecium aurelia can use the resources more efficiently, so therefore Paramecium aurelia population reproduce more rapidly. Okay, okay, reproduce more rapidly. And then lastly, okay, you could also include in your answer for the observation on Paramecium caudatum. Okay, so you observe at the end of the experiment that the population of Paramecium caudatum will reduce and lastly will be eliminated from the population. Okay, from the population. Okay, so Paramecium caudatum is eliminated or extinct. Okay, so question B, define the term niche. Okay, so again, this is the same question as the previous one, and the mark for the definition is only 1 mark. So I'm just going to repeat the answer, which is niche. It refers to the functional role of an organism in an ecosystem and the habitat or physical area where it lives and grow. So maksudnya sebenarnya niche ni adalah, okay, sebenarnya organism tu ataupun spesies tu dia duduk ke area mana, kan? Apa peranan organism tu, dia sebagai predator ke, producer ke, dia duduk kat mana, kan? Dia makan apa, kan? So apa peranan dia dekat dalam habitat tu? That is niche, right? So the habitat or the physical area where the organism lives and grow. Okay. So C, state the niche of a plant, leaf and a caterpillar. Okay, so the niche, okay, apa? What is the role of plant leaf and what is the role of the caterpillar? Okay, in that habitat. Okay, for example, in that habitat. So the mark is 2 mark. So 1 mark for the explanation on the niche of plant leaf. The other one is for the explanation for the niche of the caterpillar. So for plant leaf, okay, they provide food for the caterpillar. They are the producer. Okay, so that is the first point. Okay, plant leaves provides food for the caterpillar. Okay, second mark, caterpillar consumes the plant leaf for food. So caterpillar is the consumer. So, okay, so caterpillar consumes the plant leaf for food. Okay, so that's the end of this video. So for question number 5 and the rest will be discussed in the second video. Okay, in the next video.